Hello everybody, welcome. Today is Valentine's Day. In the United States, perhaps in some other places. Now notice that in this case, where and when you are determines whether or not it is Valentine's Day. And so, is it true that today is Valentine's Day? Is that a fact? No. Well, it depends on the frame of reference, right? It depends on what you're doing with your mind and how you're collapsing the manifolds of possibility, identity, role, relationship, history, attention, what and why. For what purposes and why you are collapsing this manifold. And the one thing I nearly, I nearly never hear humans speak of is uncollapsing the manifold. They're really concerned with popping bubbles. And in order to pop these bubbles of infinite potential, insight, new perspectival ways of seeing, learning, and knowing. The entire possibility space of being. And apparently, many of them, somewhat unsurprisingly, mostly men, really think that the whole thing is about what is the point, right? I've got a point. Now, weirdly, unless a certain appendage on my body I'm not even going to finish that sentence, I'll leave that to you. And I should say, besides my fingers, like my fingertips are kind of pointy. They're also soft and round. They're delicate. They can caress, which weirdly makes bubbles inside the caressed one, presuming that everybody's enjoying this caressing. Or they can poke, right? They can impose themselves. Right? And basically, hugs make bubbles, punches injure, right? So these two primordial principles, which are far vaster and more primordial than almost any principles I can imagine. They're so profound that when first introduced to them, we may be inclined, we may feel inclined, or we may respond by just thinking something, right? Oh, that's a novel way of looking at things. Yeah. Or we may decide, we may feel, sense, become in the way of an intellectual understanding. Right? And try to imagine the difference between someone with an intellectual understanding of what the piano is and can do, right? And another person. So that person is standing, on the right side of the stage. They've got a point. Yeah? And someone next to them, say a young child of 7, begins improvising one of the most beautiful pieces of music anyone in this room will ever encounter in their life. And think about the experiences of the audience, whoever that may be. And let's presume a live audience here, right? And let's also presume this is not being recorded. You're either here for this or you're not. Yeah? Now, in response to the intellectual who tells us the structure of the piano, well, there's a metal harp. There's a bunch of strings in there. Most keys have 3 strings. Some keys hit 2. There's dampers and levers and pedals and hammers and And there's the structure of the piano, which is built around the harp, which is usually a vast, heavy metal object. Within, this is crazy. So within the space inside the harp, what's going to happen is tone generation. Right? This is what we hear. They will generate tones in sequences, in time, harmonies, melodies, figures, music theoretical, tonal structures in temporality, and then the acoustics of the piano and the acoustics of the room and the biology of the human ear and all this. That's not unhelpful. But you won't require even one piece of that information to go mad with joy at the child's improvisation. You will bubble. So, when I talk about these two things, bubbling and pointiness, it should be very obvious that there are all these symbols, right, that we are familiar with, that we've been shown, but they don't lead us to this primordial awareness, without which we are largely bereft. Because this is so primordial that if you lose track of this and you are distracted by various pointy things and various fake bubbling generators, you will not understand what it means to be. Not even to be alive, just to be, to exist, to become, to grow, learn, see, love. Now again, this discussion is a little bit similar to the pointy, discursive, didactic guy on the right hand of the stage, where he's trying to show you features of the underlying mechanics. The difference is that what I'm attempting to do is to paint a cartoon that might be more important than any diagram ever constructed. I am doing both. I am improvising in this moment, conceptual improvisation about fundamental aspects of reality which humans never discuss. Now, never is, let's just call it very rarely, and only in usually strange contexts. I promise you that if you could actually understand the utterances of human children and what is motivating them and what they are experiencing when they exclaim, when they make musical sounds funded by monumental enthusiasm, if, like a brilliant alien who spent its life studying the nature of sound and its emission by organisms on trillions of worlds, the alien would be able to translate the human child's concerns, offerings, improvisations, excitement and enthusiasm into something so staggering that it would obliterate human science. Because the children, when they speak, they are not doing what the adults are doing when they speak. Much of the time, particularly in their early developmental arcs before they've been fully subjected to the deprivations, primarily, of representational cognition and the templates and systems presently dominating their adult parents and the worlds in which they live. Now, I want to show you some figures, right? Dreaming is almost always a form of bubbling. And in case this isn't obvious, and it's so obvious that it's staggering that any of us could overlook it. What is a witch's bubbling cauldron? Right? What is that? Now, it depends on what order, what register you want to see into. Right? From register 1, it is simply a large metal pot, we might imagine. Could be a stone pot, in which some liquid is being heated. Right? This is the prosaic clinical explanation / definition. By the way, that definition, it means de-infinitizing, and to de-infinitize is to throw away most of the bubbles that are actually present and available, accessible, and can be refolded to produce even better bubbles. So the clinical explanation is Jesus is ridiculous. But we wouldn't want to be necessarily without it. So what happens I can ask a very clinical question. From what sequence of events did you arise? And we can start with the beginning of the universe or the solar system, wherever you want to start, right? There's register. Freedom in the beginning. Many people will say, well, my progenitor and my mom were having a kind of an intimate moment, and his body produced a substance that entered and traveled in her body, arriving at an egg. What happens when that substance arrives in the near proximity, or even avatars of the substance, right? Because it's not the whole substance that arrives there. What happens when sperm arrive in proximity to an egg that they were forged to, fertilize? So, a lot of crazy things happen, but the thing that should be really obvious, if you know anything about eugenesis, right, ontogenesis, there's probably another word that I'm looking for here and can't quite find. Here's what happens. A point-like particle is introduced to a sphere, and these particles are non-ordinary. They are not objects. Right? They have a trillion qualities that any ordinary object can never have. And they have qualities that certainly no artificial object could ever possibly have. But here's what happens. When the sperm penetrates the egg, the ovum, and this is a very sophisticated process. It's nothing like what we think is going on. There are domains and dimensions of this event that humans have abjectly failed to develop representational language or templates or models of, and so they do not see these aspects. What do those look like? Let me show you one of those aspects. So, from this perspective that I am suggesting, which I am not trying to tell you is the truth, I'm saying it is good for seeing. This is good for seeing. That situation with the womb and the egg and the sperm is recapitulating the origin of time-space itself and every feature of time-space from stars to black holes. That's what I mean when I say the humans don't have the right model, or they are missing crucial perspectival lenses that are more potent and powerful than anything they play with. Yet they are made of these, literally. But here's what happens. I'll tell you a little secret. The egg pervades over the electromagnetic environment local to her surface and beyond it in such a way that she can impose selective fields on incoming sperm to a degree that allows her to impede some of them and lubricate the path of others, such that the first one that locks the matrix, right? Once a sperm embeds in the, there's a word for the surface of the ovum, I can't find it. Once a sperm embeds, that gate locks, right? It's not a perfect lock, it's temporal, right? So if two sperm hit very close to the same time, strange things happen. But it locks the membrane. Yeah. So, a sperm penetrates, we'll say, and penetrates is the wrong word, not really, right? It's not actually just penetration, it's synergistic. It synergizes, they become one, they unify. See, the frame of reference you use to describe the situation to yourself determines what you will see. Do you see this? Can you notice this? This is absolutely crucial to the possibility of cognitive and perspectival liberty. But then what happens is the opposite of human thinking, right? Because a point touching a sphere leads to unimaginable bubblizations in infinite dimensions. The egg begins to differentiate internally its structures, and the first thing it does is forms multiple bubbles from what was just a few moments ago a single sphere. Those bubbles polarize, right? We have words about this polarization. We call, I've heard biologists refer to this as the vegetal pole and the animal pole. There's a bunch of polarizations that happen, internal, external, neural organs. What you have are these entities we call pluripotent cells, and they begin to differentiate along at least, that I am aware of, at least 9 kinds of different polar axes. Polarization. This is the word we have. An alien that was super intelligent and had watched this trillions of times on trillions of worlds would have a word so much better that the idea of polarization would never occur, because the fundamental principles above that are generating that would be absolutely apparent in consciousness. And the possibility space of intelligence for humans, right, for each one of us, is infinite. So there are modes and forms of this that we have never imagined. I'll try to give you some kind of simple example. You could meet a mind so advanced, quote unquote, or you don't have to think of it as advanced. You can think of it as free of obstructions, right? Less obstructed than yours, vastly less obstructed, that could give you a single token, right? A single concept that was so packed with primordial information that possessing or having been exposed to this single concept, I'm going to name this thing, I'm going to call it a superior, right? It's not a metaphor, it's not an analogy, it's the opposite. It's the star from which metaphors and analogies are generated. They could communicate to you a single concept that was so profound that you would be better off in every way imaginable. Being exposed to the single concept would be more developmentally profound for you, and not just in the moment of reception, but in every subsequent moment of your mind. That you would be better off than if you had read every single thing that humans had ever written. Right? This is the opposite of having a point. This is what intelligent bubbleization is about. Now, the humans have all kinds of strange things to say about dreaming, and many of them speak with authority. Some modes of those intelligences are very clinical, right? They are didactic. They are parts and systems and model-based. And some modes are imaginative, speculative, playful, creative, spiritual. You know, what is often dismissed as, mere fantasy or woo. I love that dismissal because without fantasy, you can't have a point. One of these things comes first. All right? Let me make the principle clear. The organisms that are fertilized by a traveling element, yeah? Pollen, sperm, you name it, bacteria, viral particles. There are these two principles, right? There's like origin, and it sends out these little traveling things. They gather complexity, they return to origin, they fertilize origin, and the process reiterates. Right? There are precisely 0 males that were not produced in the body of a female. Artificial clones accepted. But you could not have artificial clones without the eggs produced in the body of a female. So even in that case, right, something very interesting is going on. And what I want to point out here is that I'm looking for a rhetorical figure. Poor me. Pity me. I'm trying to find, I'm reaching for the rhetoric jar, the figures. Every sperm had its origin in a female body. The women produce that by which they are fertilized, right? So there are no fertilizers that were not produced by the fertile ones, the bubbling ones. And in case this isn't obvious, men are physically more angular, pointy, and they have in humans anyway, they have a reproductive organ, which is not merely a reproductive organ, by the way. That thing has 19 kinds of features that the humans have completely become confused about the absence of. And that organ, under certain conditions, can become rigid. And its rigidity is part of the process by which humans are usually fertilized. Is it possible to fertilize without rigidity? Yes, probably. You can have surrogate rigidity and so forth. Right? You can squirt some things up inside mother in the right moon cycle and so forth. But right beneath that are two bubbles. No bubbles, no agents of fertilization. Yeah? You see this bubbly, pointy thing is so profound that our own bodies are made of it. Dreaming is like bubbling. Talking can be like bubbling. Laughter, bubbling. Orgasm, bubbling. Right? Liberation, bubbling. Joy, bubbling. Pleasure, bubbling. Pain, very pointy. Suffering, anti-bubbling. Isolation, no bubbles. Right? Illness and injury, the bubbling is not going well. So when we think, which is almost always the opposite of dreaming, there are different modes of what we can do in mind space, so to speak. But when we think, usually what we are doing, often anyway, is we are collapsing bubbles to their intersections and producing a kind of a stick figure. And then we continue to collapse the stick figure until, quote unquote, as my friend D is fond of saying, at the end of the day, and then we present the point. Meaning, at the collapse of the manifolds of possibility and intelligence, here's the thing that actually fucking matters, and I'm going to try to force you to authorize it. I'm going to show you a proof. I'm going to compel you to see. I'm not going to invite you to see bubbling. I'm going to drive you to seeing at the point of the sword of my argument. Pointiness. That's dickish behavior. We wouldn't want to be without it, but we should understand how dangerous it is and what it destroys to achieve this Pyrrhic victory. Yeah? Pyrrhic. Wow, there's a word I've used maybe 3 times in my life. This is a trope that refers to a situation in which what one sacrifices to achieve victory on the battlefield is so egregious that it would certainly have been better to have lost. Most of thinking is like this. Most of representational cognition is like this. Repcog is pointy, jagged, disoriented, has no connection to origin-intimacy relationship most of the time. I'm going to stop making these apologies. Just understand that when I say something that sounds like it's explicit and universal, I always mean useful or important exceptions noted. Because, hey, I'm trying to make a point here, right? See, and the more I focus on making a point, the more rigid I become, right? The more single valued, right? I get, really ironically, in order to illuminate this matter, to make some bubbles together here, I'm using a pointy heuristic, yeah, a method, technique. Yeah. Now I could tell you a joke about it, And that would probably be more profound, right? And the joke that occurred to me is that one of the most crucial Bibles ever composed by an adult human in our time is a story entitled Alice in Wonderland. And fundamentally, if you read this story with the lens of pointiness and bubbleization, what you will discover is that Alice is undergoing an anamnoetic adventure. She is unfracturing, she is unsplitting. She enters the land where bubbleizations and the principles that progenerate the possibility space and watch over it, influence it, instruct it, are present to her as figures, like the white rabbit, who is not merely time, but also that which generates the possibility of temporalization itself. And what that is actually is relationship. And in case you don't trust me, here's the joke. Have you ever heard the word isolation? Yeah? And isn't that the punishment that we impose on bad folks? We isolate them. And what does that cause? It causes them to be absent or late in every relationship. And what is it that the white rabbit first says? I'm late for a very important diate. And here's the weird thing. So late. Ion. This is magical language. There's a magical language, a bubble language, hidden inside the human language. And the children speak it. The adults, they think it's cute. Yeah, that's what they do. Oh, it's so cute. Look, she made some words. They think it's cute. I mean, for the children are trying to get the adults to see something. The children are bubbleizing. And the adults are very concerned about angles and maps and pointers and fucking, cause, effect, consequences, equivalencies, evaluations. So they cannot hear the children. They cannot hear the sun. They cannot hear the moon. They cannot hear the world. They do not hear the living beings. They are literally not H-E-R-E-ing. Right? This here and here, H-E-A-R. Right? The H, ear. What does that H stand for? It's the voice of all beings. Shh. Don't tell anyone I told you that. I'm not supposed to say that down here. This is clandestine knowledge. Forbidden. Verboten. The organisms are bubbling together in one huge meta-bubble. The minds and hearts and spirits and souls of origin are percolating in a cauldron. You can call it what you like. The world, the solar system, the universe, time-space, my mother's womb. That cauldron, the witch's cauldron, is the feminine power. Right? To contain, to house, to nurture. The most essential bubbleizations. Right? Eugenesis, ontology. Excuse me. Well, it's not entirely wrong. I meant ontogenesis. And I may have these words wrong. I'm not concerned about using the perfect word, but I like artful one. So if you think about the sun and the moon, right, or you think about things that are actually primordial, the reproductive intelligences that orient organismal sensing, being, development, existence. These are so primordial that compared to these, things like physics or math are trivial. Right? Without these, you don't have physics or math. There's no one there to do them. Bubbleization and points. Okay, so there's another feature of this that I think is really important, or significant is a better word. Although important matters. By the way, this word fertilization. The fertis, the first part, is the feminine aspect. And the last part, actually, let's see, fertilization. Fertilization. So, the first part, fertile. This is the feminine aspect. And then the AT particle can be understood as first principle, that which draws together and also which divides. And the T is tree, right? Branching histories, branching futures, refolded, rebubbleized anew. And this ion, I-O-N, this is the pointer in English.
Okay, but we have to go there by bike because it's a little bit too far away.
That brings to mind or invokes the one who travels, right? The the messenger, the angel, the sperm. Now the women's bodies are bubbly. I won't remark on the politics of common, imprinted expectations around feminine form, or how those transform over time, right? From a situation in which the bubbly forms, the very bubbly forms, right? The forms that we moderns might suppose to indicate a problem, the problem of obesity. These were always the preferred forms, because more fat, right? F-at, same at particle, right? F in front of it, fertilization, that F, that feminine. Right? More fat means richer children. Fat is richness. Exemplars of this in nature are hippopotami, whales. Fertility embodied. Feminine. So, there's a principle above masculine and feminine, right? And I'm trying to reach for one of the figures that can communicate this to our awareness, a frame, yeah, or I don't mean a frame, I mean a reference frame, right? A way of approaching identity, origin, development, meaning, that illuminates the entire field and creates new bubbling possibilities, and is not particularly oriented to pop them and reduce them to a stick figure that is authoritatively sovereign. It forces us to authorize it. It's very pointy. In fact, that whole behavior in humans very closely resembles a word that begins with R. That is a placeholder or a pointer to all forms of egregious violation. Bubbleizations, pointiness. Now, I'm not trying to denigrate the pointy aspect, but here's the thing. A pointer that is surrounded by celebratory bubbling, that's a pointer you can trust. Right? If the bubble field that is generating the point is so beautiful, so natural, so fraught with the spirits of origin and virtue and nobility and love, awareness, sensitivity, humility. The pointers that kind of a field produces are trustworthy. They're worthy of trust. Problem is, you can mimic them. You can mimic all of that. You can lie. You can create a figure whose structure is disorienting, and compels you by force. By force of what? Logic, syllogism, axiom, antecedents, structure, models, technique. So it's not like making love. It's more like what happens on certain streets worth avoiding late at night in cities I'll not here name. And there's another feature of the bubbleization thing and the pointy thing, which I just gave an example of. Right? If I give you the specific words for what I was just indicating indirectly, right? This is more powerful. The indirection is more powerful because it's more original. Right? You have to recompose what I said to determine if and what I might have been pointing at without me forcing you by saying the specific words, which I still will not say here, that describe what's going on those streets in those cities late at night, for the most part. And in hotels, motels, and massage parlors around the world. So, you should notice that one of these is more powerful in almost every case, and this is a feature that's well understood in rhetoric, indirect communication. Right? If I say something that resembles every step I take, I remember you. You who protected me with your little laces and your bright colors. This is a very different thing than if I say, wow, I really appreciate shoes. And the bubbling aspect vastly prefers indirection because it is less likely to collapse bubble forms into explicit stick figures. And it leaves the freedom of relation and imagination open even though it is directing it. It's open. It doesn't produce complete finished figures in the mind, the stuff we call knowledge, the fossilized remains of what would be insight. In most cases, knowledge resembles an inherited library of templates of identity, function, meaning, value, relationship that mostly replace those things. Right? Well, why would you want that? Well, if you want to build machines, that's very useful. If you want to be alive, that'll get you killed right quick. Yeah. And everything around you too. Now that was a very pointy statement, I know, but those machines are anti-bubbleization artifacts, and they're not friendly to anything that lives, breathes, or becomes fertile. Someone asked me the other day, how do you feel? What are your feelings about AI? And it's like asking me, I don't know, what are your feelings about nuclear weapons? Although the existence of AI gives me a lot of fodder for insight and learning and understanding histories, right? It refocuses a vast array of little toys in my box that are improved by being subjected to the reflective surface of this idea and its reality. But what I said was very simple, and I apologized secondly, but if I were wise, I'd have done it first. I said, if I could exchange my life for the capacity to push a button and make that go away forever, I would do it right this moment without any hesitation. And my friend was like, "Wow, that's pretty severe, right? Or intense." I'm not sure what the word he used was. And I said, "Now I'm not trying to cast shade on anyone who is entranced or fascinated with this tech." That's the apology I might have given first. Were I being gentle? Because this was a very pointy moment for me, obviously. Right? I was collapsing to the one point that I think is the most important. But then I said something really trippy, I think. And I would be very surprised if it were not highly credible. Perfectly credible? There are very few such things, if any. Because you can always move and reforge the perspectival lenses, and this produces a different result. But I said, I feel the same way about cars. And I also feel fairly confident that every organism, every mother, every father, every child, every grandmother, every grandfather, every being, every plant, every tree, every forest, the ocean itself, the sun, the earth, the moon, the sky, our starry origins, all of them would agree with me. All of them would agree with me. Right. This is the kind of a, quote, truth where the voice of the chorus is the origin of authorization, trust, right? Not clinicity, logic, cutting things into parts and then trying to weave them back together with some model. Yeah. Now, I don't know. There might... It's almost certain that my perspective on this matter is incomplete. There are perspectival toys I can use and forge that create a very different view, right? One proposed by the extremely confused, but nonetheless serious and making the attempt to see better person named Joe Rogan, a pretty pointy guy. And Joe has proposed, for example, that the humans are a larval form whose butterfly is intelligent machines. So we're just going to change into that. We're going to metamorphose from organisms to mechanisms. And that's how it's supposed to be and is good, true, beautiful, and obeys the developmental priorities of at least the Earth, if not timespace itself. Now, I can entertain that perspective. I could even argue for it. It's the rationalist's form of aping insight. Right? It apes insight, but disposes of the histories and futures of all beings on this world in so doing. So what I'm trying to do with my bubbly statement is illuminate the purpose of nature's origins, spirit, intelligences of the organisms, and to show the distinction between those and machines, and that machines collapse the manifolds of living worlds very rapidly towards dead terrain that mimics organic processes, and then somehow claims that this is better, it works better, right? The concept of a manifold is central here, but what I want you to understand and see into and toward is that minds themselves are very complex manifold-based reference frames. They're not reference frames in exactly the same way that Einstein describes them, but without that reference frame, you don't have general relativity, right? Einstein had to have a very specific array of concerns and had to filter the landscape of possible concerns to produce an array of concerns that would lead in a very pointy way to general relativity, which we, I think, can imagine opened the door to the creation of nuclear weapons. And most of what general relativity did for us, well, the story isn't finished, but in the case that somebody presses the button tomorrow or next week, that will collapse the entire history of science to dead lineages of beings. Right? It's at the end of the day, it meant everyone died. Horribly, unnecessarily, egregiously, violated. Right? Minds are reference frames, and we can engineer them together. We don't have to accept the modes and forms that were common or commonly authorized, in the same way that I don't have to eat at McDonald's. I can go, I don't know, anywhere. Suppose I go somewhere in the Amazon rainforest and I sit down with a tribe as they make the soup with which they feed their entire people this night. That is the opposite of McDonald's. And what I'm trying to get you to understand, or to see with me, is that the templates that we've been given, the reference frames we use in cognition, degrade our awareness. They are extremely lossy. They are more expensive each time you implement them. And with very few exceptions, they make you dumber every time you make a move. They collapse the bubble space. And it is possible, and in fact, strap in, I think we've been doing it right here, to show another form of template, a different form, right? That in its concerns, structure, activity, refertilizes our minds and rebubblizes our intelligences, all of them. An infinite array of intelligences natural to our form of being. And I am very concerned about these. On our world, it is absolutely imperative that the long domination of pointy, repcog templates come to an end. We don't have to fight it. That's the wrong move. It responds very adeptly to being fought. It's made for fighting, right? You do not want to fight it. What you want to do is enrapture it, right? You want to enrapture it, to surround it with brilliant singing bubbles of its own origin, its own natures, its best purposes, its beauty. You want to orient the pointy aspects. By surrounding them, encompassing them, by re-enwombing them, W-O-M-B. By the way, that B is bubble, that M is mom, that O is everything, and the W, well, the W is the principle of making new bubbles. But I use the word is casually, not explicitly, playfully. I'm inviting, not declaring, or doing my best to do so. These toys are things I never imagined. I, as a young person, was exposed to people who made astonishing toys in science fiction and fantasy and children's stories. I was recently at a friend's house, and a very eccentric, brilliant, autodidact person. And my friend, I was asking them about their music, and it took a while before they were willing to, before they felt safe enough to vulnerably present something that was obviously very precious. And he said, I have a children's song I made. I make children's songs. Now, I know what's going on here, and this has nothing to do with what adults think. This person is still speaking with a child's voice. Their heart still speaks with a child's voice. And these children's songs are not necessarily songs for children. They are the song of a child who is a grown man. I never imagined the existence of these playthings that can radically alter the nature of human cognition, ability, sensing, intelligence, awareness, perspective. Because most of the toys that I ever saw were kind of infected with this desire to be reproduced at nearly any cost. What's the goal of a book publisher? sell a lot of books. The people read the books, various kinds of bubbles occur in their minds. There's a bunch of bubbleization that happens during the reading, or the reception of a video, or film, or show. Right? The problem is that you can have the mostly opposite of bubbling appearing as the most effective bubbleizer. Mimicry, similitude, resemblance, convenience, contraptions. Your mind, first of all, see, this is the weird thing. Imagine the existence of a people who never use the word I, me, mine, or your. Right? So in their experience, our minds, it's always our minds together, right? Or even the many spaces, the many ways of minds that we here now bring to life together, we fertilize them together. The idea that I have a mind, that my mind is my possession, that frame by itself snips 19 wings off that bird, right? And then tries to be compelling about the remaining wings, and with the remaining wings, and attempts to tell us stories about why those wings were better snipped off. Meanwhile, precisely 0 birds would agree with this. Now, I'm using a multi-winged bird because a multi-winged bird whose wings are filled with eyes is one of the best figures to reintroduce us to the nature of interiority, of mental experience, cognitive experience, emotional experience. Our minds are originally unframed. They are not little books or rectangles. They are not little boxes with shit in them. You don't have a mind. In fact, the thing you will probably conceive of if I use the word your mind is basically to that space to those potentials, it is the difference between a rather crappy and very expensive and lethal to maintain automobile and time-space itself. Right? These things we use this word mind, these features of our experience we use this word mind to point to. What is being pointed at is nothing like the thing we are pointing with. It does not resemble that. It resembles something so ridiculous that if you could imagine a creature that is all the creatures that have ever been or will be on Earth, we'll limit it a little bit, and it changes between synergies of them before your eyes so that you cannot possibly tell what it is except you notice it's alive. It is all the beings, it is all the animals, it is all the eyes. It is the body of the chorus of all beings. That is your mind. And the part of you, if we were free, or if we can free each other, and it is my dearest hope that we can, to have a richer and less encumbered experience of our interiority, our intelligences, our creativities, the priorities and urgencies for which we came to human incarnation. And it is possible. We're doing it here to a limited degree. But when we do it together, in a small group, It is infinitely more powerful than anything I can show you. And yet I try to make seeds that such groups could use as toys to play with together that would accelerate their capacity for liberation. But if you could see just for a moment beyond the fingernail on the pinky of your right hand, which is what the humans are usually pointing at when they say your mind. They're pointing at the most collapsed state of it. Much in the same way as I might compare a fork to a forest. Right? If you could just see the hand, if you could just see the palm, right? If you could just climb up from that fingernail to where the pinky joins the rest of the hand, in consciousness, in awareness, you would never believe anything the humans generally say about nature, truth, reality. They're playing with the wrong mode of ideas. There's a second mode that is so bubblicious that it just generates insight after insight after insight. And one of these bubbles, just one of them, if you could receive it and be exposed to it, and you're made of this. Everything alive here is made of this. As I mentioned before, you would be, what is the right word? You would be exalted to a position above everything that has ever been spoken by human beings. Right? You would rise to the star space that generates the possibility of ideas. Yeah? And this is our nature, not the fork, not the fingernail on the end of your pinky. I have covered about a 1/1000th of what I hoped, but perhaps I have made a fertile mirror in which we can play together. Yeah. I'm grateful for this time and humbled by the incredible love and support I have received throughout my life, and all those who were my mentors and sheltering beings, my mothers, my grandmothers, my fathers, my grandfathers. The fertile lie at ion. I wish you beauty, liberation, reconciliation, rejuvenation, healing, wonder, awe, liberty, perspectival freedom, play, creativity, brilliant adventures, intelligence, healing, memory, dreaming, and the fulfillment of the promise of your human incarnation this time around. Please take a moment, like, share, comment, subscribe. This is my one bow to something resembling the demon of advertising. And I bow only with my little pinky finger. Yeah, support the channel in whatever way feels natural to you. Let me know you made it this far. Share your insights, your experiences, your thoughts, concerns, questions. I will respond to any question that I receive, if not publicly, privately. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to bubbleizing again very soon. Bye-bye for now.